Yeah, that's a completely different
Feel.
feel. I mean, our first one went there, and then I got
Exactly.
lazy and then went over. But then when I read,
Yeah, you put most of them in there. We got 2, 4, 6. So yeah, that's pretty good shooting though, right there.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? FSU staying in the news. Well, you're the back. I got my guest. He follows me enough, so he probably understands that this is probably. I speak presidential, is what I tell people nowadays. Not because I don't. We don't use the best grammar. We don't use the Queen's English, and we definitely don't use courtroom available talk. Even though I have learned how to tailor it as I've had to go through my share of civil legal matters. Hell, I become a damn near lawyer. As much bullshit I've had to be through a lot of this stuff. But as you guys see the title, one thing that I've learned and my opponents learned, especially with me when I've gone through my stuff, discovery is a motherfucker. And that is the title of today's show. And if you haven't heard, FSU has been in the news for the better part of God knows when, in their attempt to be able to get out of the ACC and to be able to do the best things that are for the university. Now, anybody with common sense or that's dealt in business knows there's no contract that you can't get out of if you really, really want to push the issue. But it's going to cost you something. It's going to be this. And 2 years ago, I started telling people, hey, we're not going to be in the ACC. And then everybody was like, this Game of Thrones, this GOR, which every time I hear it, I just think of GOT, which is like Game of Thrones. So like it throws my mind off. I probably should have led in with that music. But they treat it like it's the Game of Thrones, like it's like some scary ass shit. Like you can't like there aren't dents in that. So as we've gone through it, I hit people for a living. My sister is an attorney, but she's not in contract law. I happen to know a lot of attorneys, and I've been following my guy Doug Rohan, and he's been kind of breaking it down. And you guys know how I like to do stuff. I like to break things down to the simplest common denominator, so that we, as a fan base and a community, can go back and regurgitate the information that we got from people, so that we sound smart too. Because a lot of the legalese and a lot of the other shit, the big words, don't make sense. But I've seen what he said before on some other things. And I said, you know what? I want to get him on. And yesterday, we saw even more things come out. So what we're going to try to do is we're going to try to condense all of the legal stuff that we've had in a short amount of time. And then we're going to look at what's happening now, where Florida State stands, and how they can get that. So also, if you're following this on just some ground rules, for those who are in here, if you're this is a colored section only comment, which means you got to be a green. Doesn't mean you got to be black. Just got to be a green. That means when you comment, I say green. Greenies get their questions answered. Whites don't, unless they put the super chat. So, like, man, Cornelius Green is clearly black by his profile picture on YouTube, but he's white. So if Cornelius wants to ask a question, he got to put something on the super chat, which we'll be able to get to see. If you're watching this on X, I appreciate it. Please watch this on X. But if you want to comment, get your ass over to YouTube, because that's how we'll read it, unless it's just a really solid question, which we get those from time to time. But please share this with friends. We want to make sure we give my guy all of the love, all of the benefit. Go follow him at Rohan Law PC, ROHANLAWPC, on social media. Get a good follow. I've enjoyed what I've learned. Top of the morning to you, my friend.
Morning. Thanks for having me on board. I love coming in and talking to your people.
Gotcha. What do you mean? Just fucking
followers.
Nah, I'm just messing with you. But one of the things that a lot of people see, they see a contract and they automatically just assume that, and for the most part, when it's with both parties, you do follow the contract. So it gives you guidelines. But is a contract as just ironclad as what people think it is? Just going through the basis of what a contract is and what does it mean between two parties.
Well, start off by understanding that there's an entire industry within the legal field dealing with contracts and breach of contracts. This is something that happens on a routine basis. A contract is a meeting of the minds with some consideration. That's an important part of contract law. There has to be some financial benefit or some other benefit in the contract, but it's two parties coming together and deciding what they want their agreement to look like moving forward. Now, in all situations, you can't presume, or you can't look into the future and see all the possible scenarios that might happen down the road. So you come to a situation at some point where the relationship sours. You can't come to some agreement on how to amicably divorce. This is basically a business divorce. And then from there, you then get into litigation to talk about why or why not a contract should be broken. So that's where we are here today. There's no such thing as a perfect contract. We're just dealing with, okay, now that we're sitting here in 2024 and we started this contract in 2013, what has changed? What's different today that no longer makes this contract valid for both sides?
So, okay, so the best point right now, just again, I like the simplicity of it. Unfortunately, what happens is 50%, I think 55% chance now that if you get married, you're going to get a divorce. So most of us in this timeline can probably, either you've been through it or you know somebody or your family's been through it. So basically a marriage contract is something that you sign, but you can break that. So what makes you think that you wouldn't be able to break something else moving forward? But it's if you can't separate amicably.
Correct.
Which is always the key, which in any of it, and that's why a lot of times you have your prenups. I remember one of the things I did with one of my businesses. We had a lawyer set us up, and the first thing she said was, "Okay, when the business ends, how do you guys want this to go?" And we were like, "We're not ending." She's like, "Dude, it's like marriage. Nobody walks into their marriage hoping it's going to end, but statistically speaking, it always does. If we get how we would split it up out the way now, things can be done a little bit easier." So yeah, that didn't happen. That doesn't happen very often. But so now that we know what a contract is, and now that we know about the industry, and now that we know about, you know, what it's kind of similar to, that we can kind of go with that. Can you walk us through how we got to this point with Florida State and the ACC?
In the simplest of terms, and if you want to expand on any of this, we can. But in 2013, after Maryland left the ACC got very nervous about how the parties would ultimately divorce, just like you said. So they bumped up the penalty for leaving the conference, and all of the parties agreed that they would go ahead and sign and become an entity for purpose of viewership. They wanted to make sure, and I might have the timeline wrong, maybe Maryland left in 2016. So the original ACC agreement between all the members was in 2013. Maryland leaves in 2016. So in 2016, there was an amendment to the contract where they bumped up the penalty for leaving. And at that point, we have what's called in the original complaint, the Hobson's choice. So in 2016, you're already a member of the ACC. The ACC comes along and says, all of the members, if you want to stay, you need to sign this new contract in 2016. If you don't want to stay, that's fine. And you're right. If you sign the contract, you're agreeing to the contract. But the penalty, even back in 2016 for leaving, was about $234 million. So FSU that wasn't in a position to leave in 2016 said, okay, if everybody else is signing it, we'll sign it too. So they really didn't have a choice in 2016 to sign that contract. Then you fast forward to 2021. The next step there is that the ACC is negotiating directly with ESPN about these members and their television viewership and their television broadcast rights. ESPN signs an extension with ACC, but in that 2021 extension, they only paid for the rights through 2026. And they included a clause in there saying by February of 2025, we need to decide if we want to extend this deal to the 2036 period. But ESPN was the only one that could decide that. It's what's called unilateral. ESPN could or could not go forward depending on what they wanted. One of the sticking points of this litigation is that in that 2021 agreement, the ACC engaged in that contract with ESPN without talking to their various members and without getting approval from the various members. So this entire grant of rights is about the ACC negotiating TV broadcast rights on behalf of the members. And there is a requirement when there's any material media changes that they go to the members. But now we're debating whether or not that 2021 agreement with ESPN was actually a material media change. If it was, then the ACC should have gone to the members to get their approval for this new ESPN contract. But the ACC is arguing, no, this was just an administrative decision regarding the members. And so we didn't have to go back to each of the members for their vote. So that's what happened in 2021. Now in 2022 and 2023, FSU has been very vocal about the fact that this 4.5% annual escalation has led to a disparity. The SEC just signed a $3 billion deal with ESPN, while the ACC product is getting paid millions by ESPN. So there's this huge disparity. There's this huge gap in how much the SEC is getting. So now Vanderbilt in 2027 is going to be getting $30 million a year, while FSU and each of those members are all getting about $12 million in 2027, according to this contract. So that's why FSU has said this is an existential threat. There's a possibility that we can no longer function as a championship program, and we need to figure out a way to get out of this deal.
So, in going back in time, around 2016 was the first time that Texas had threatened. It might have been a little earlier, but Texas had made the threat that they were going to leave the Big 12, and that's when they were able to get the Longhorn Network and different things. And I remember Florida State was in a similar situation before we signed it, to where we were trying to get it's really that second and third tier rights to your not only your football programming, but to be able to show all your other stuff, because then you could start to see that it was a money game. Everybody was trying to get as much, because the facilities were changing, people were doing this, and obviously it's an arms race. You have to be able to have bread to be able to build top-notch facilities to be able to get the best players to come. I know a lot of people are like, so scholarship's a scholarship, blah, 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 but I also say a house is a house. It's 4 walls and a roof, but like if you can live in a mansion, you're going to always live in a mansion over a shack, if you can afford it. So, and then people kind of get it a little bit more. So it's always about the money. It's never not about the money. It's always about the money. Why, in your opinion, or is this something that why we want to sue to get the discovery? Why would ESPN negotiate so differently with the SEC and the ACC? And what I mean by that is, why are we in such a long contract and one-sided contract with ESPN when it seems like the SEC is in multiple short-term contracts, which is why they have a lot more leverage? Is this something that we're also trying to argue on our case with why we need to get out of this? Because they're obviously not following best industry practices, which means they're not handling their fiduciary responsibilities?
You used the exact term correctly, fiduciary. That's one of the elements of the complaint. FSU is alleging that the ACC breached its fiduciary duty to Florida State, and that's why the contract with the ACC needs to be invalidated. So what they're saying is the ACC promised all of its members, give us your TV rights, we will negotiate collectively on your behalf. And in doing so, you're going to get a higher value than if you tried to negotiate by yourself. At the same time that agreement was happening, this was the area of John Swafford and Raycom and his son that was running Raycom. The ACC already was in a basketball first mentality, not appreciating the value that football brought in TV revenue. So when these contracts were originally contemplated, what they wanted was those second tier production rights for Raycom. They wanted to introduce and ensure the survivability of Raycom over the interests of Florida State and its members. So the argument from the Florida State Board of Trustees is the ACC neglected its fiduciary duty. They didn't operate in our best interest because they had a secondary interest, and that's why this contract needs to be invalidated.
And for people who don't understand, our Board of Trustees isn't a bunch of guys that might be on Twitter, but it's not us arguing on Twitter. I don't know if you guys have ever looked at who some of these people are. I believe we have some attorneys. We have some really, really good businessmen. We have guys who are not going to just say, you know what? I feel like suing somebody today. Like, it's something that has really been, and even our athletic director, very calculated, very strategic. Our president didn't, it's not that TK wasn't. I love TK Weatherall, who was a smart guy, football guy, but smart guy. Our president's from Harvard. Like, we got guys that kind of know what they're doing here and aren't going to put us in a losing battle. But you brought up something else that I would love to see how this comes out. My sister was a smart one. I hate school. So like the idea of going to law school, to go to do more school was like torture to me. But I love like Suits. I like Suits in general, but I love the show Suits. I would watch Boston Legal. I love the courtroom. And it started with my dad. It's crazy. My dad making me watch the O.J. Simpson trial and then seeing all of these different things and the theatrics that go in all of this stuff. But you brought up something that I don't think a lot of people are aware of. You said John Swofford, who was the president of the ACC, correct? Had a son who was the president of Raycom Sports,
Correct.
who we sold rights to. Like that could probably that's probably something that's somebody's gonna have to answer for that, correct?
Yeah, it was a conflict of interest because the president of the ACC is saying we're going to negotiate this deal. And to your point before about SEC having a bunch of short-term deals, this was a long-term deal, and it included in that deal exclusivity for Raycom for the non-ESPN broadcast. So that's the first problem. The second problem is that in that agreement in 2021, it was based on the promise that they would start the ACC network. So they'd already started the SEC network. They had already started the Longhorn network. The ACC was like, this looks great. Let's do the same thing for us. So initially in those discussions, the argument was you need to sign this long-term deal before we commit to starting the ESPN ACC network. Well, unfortunately, because of some things that were going on with Disney and the recategorization of the ESPN media portfolio and what the ESPN company was going through, they didn't start the ACC network at that time. So that's where the second argument comes in, that agreement with ESPN didn't have any consideration along with it. So ESPN was given a unilateral right for that extension to 2036 without the ACC actually getting anything of value in return. So going back to your issue about the money, absolutely. The ESPN ACC deal was a bargain basement deal because they wanted to ensure Raycom's survival, not the benefit of all of the ACC members.
I'm all for the good old boy network, and I'm all for taking care of your jits, but god damn, that is bad. That's bad. I would love to just again take my non-law degree having ass and just grill Swofford for a couple seconds on that one. But because again, that's about as bad in FSU fans' terms. Again, and this is no knock. Anybody who watches my show knows I love the old man to death, God rest his soul. But this was about as bad as the old man hiring Jeff Bowden to be the offensive coordinator, which I love JB too. JB just wasn't Mark Richt, and he wasn't Jimbo Fisher. Like it was a big. I get it, but it was also it was a lack. If anything, he could have been fired for that for that shift right there. Bad business is what people say. But so going into all of this, FSU basically a year ago, if I remember correct, maybe a little bit less, but they laid the groundwork saying we out of this bitch. Like we have come to an idea that if something doesn't change, we gave them the opportunity. We let them know we about to separate. Again, using the divorce terms, you can change, but you got to give us time to change. We laid that out. They tried to come up with something. We all knew it wasn't good. When it's over, it's over. But then we come to the situation now where Florida State, basically after the bowls and all that. Actually, I'm curious at that. Did that actually have something to do with the expedited, like what FSU kind of expedited this process? The way it looked like the guy who was over the college football committee, who was an ACC guy with multiple ACC guys on that committee, completely shafting Florida State and doing unprecedented things. And even the way that our current president talked about that. Would that be part of the reason why Florida State said, you know what, F this. Let's go ahead and let's rip the Band-Aid off and get this thing started?
I think that was the straw that broke the camel's back. You have to understand that when you have a board of trustees, their job is to advise. Their job is to come up with a game plan. And it's very rare that you would ever have a unanimous decision on any subject because they're talking about contracts with, professors and the presidents and who to hire. And it's almost never a uniform, unanimous decision. But the emotional charge that came from that playoff snub, I think, was the thing that finally galvanized the board of trustees to say, yes, that this has to happen. Even for those holdouts who might have been wanting to be more patient, might have been wanting to say, look, let's give the ACC the chance to figure it out. You then had two representatives from the ACC in that college football playoff committee, and they just sat back with their arms crossed saying, yeah, the ACC is second tier. Yeah, the ACC isn't as good. So let's go ahead and let Alabama with Milroe as their quarterback come in and put on a terrible display of offensive performance instead of letting FSU come in and put on a terrible display of offense performance with a much better defense. So yes, I do think the college football playoff snub, invitational snub, was the final straw. But I don't think it's a major factor. I don't think it's a principal factor. And I don't think that any of those people that are arguing that we're doing this just because of the snub have any base in reality to say that.
It basically is not something. It's something, but it's not something we can bring up in court. Like, they don't give a damn about that.
The argument there is that that's, again, part of the breach of fiduciary duty. The ACC president is out there to advocate for the benefit of the league. The SEC commissioner had the chance to spend an hour and a half on College Game Day talking about the superiority of the SEC. Where were you? What did you do? Here's another tangible example of the ACC not sticking up for its members. You have breached your fiduciary duty among the 9 other reasons why we should get out of this contract.
Okay, I see what you're saying, because again, fiduciary, we have a bowl revenue split. So if FSU would have been in a college football invitational, that means Louisville would have been in the Orange Bowl, which means, if I don't remember what the numbers were, I only remember what it was when I played, but it was about 15. That's 20 years ago, damn near. It was $20 million per BCS or big time bowl game. So instead of getting 30 million to be 15 extra million to split amongst the teams, you got 15 million less. Whereas the SEC was able to get Bama in there, Georgia obviously go, and then I believe Missouri was able to take another top spot.
Ole Miss in the Chick-fil-A Bowl.
So it's just
another big one.
A lot of money. A lot of money to be lost, and again, out of spite, which again is cutting your nose off to spite your face, which makes absolutely no sense.
Let me throw one more layer on there too. I forget what it's called, whatever the alignment or the big picture of all the conferences. They wanted the 12-team playoff to start this year. The ACC president was one of the ones that stopped that from happening. So we could have had a 12-team playoff in 2023, but the ACC was one of 2 members of the alliance, that's what it was called, that said, no, we're going to start it in 2024 instead of 2023. When have we ever had as much parity as we had this year in 2023? I absolutely firmly believe that Norvell had a chance, and these boys had a chance to make a deep run, if not win outright this year, because there was no 2022 Georgia, there was no 2021 Clemson. This was a year for the 12-team playoff, and it was the ACC that stopped that from happening.
And even when you think about what would have happened, if you knew the entire season you had a 12-team playoff, the amount of buzz the ACC would have gotten around the time that you're having, you have 3 undefeated teams that at that point look like they may finish the regular season undefeated. North Carolina having Drake May, a top quarterback prospect, Florida State being the darlings of the transfer portal and showing the effectiveness of how to navigate the transfer portal and NIL, and Louisville under first-year head coach being able to rise and do what they needed to do. Who knows how things could have changed, as well as probably wouldn't have took that shitty CW deal either. Like I think we should leave the conference, if nothing else, with the CW. I don't know. We have a CW theory here, and don't get me wrong. Everybody has their crazy conspiracy theories. My CW theory is that every good team that plays on the CW, something bad happens. So when North Carolina lost, they played on the CW. When Louisville lost, they played on the CW. when Florida State lost Jordan Travis and basically lost our opportunity to go to, for what they say, our opportunity to go to the college football invitational. We played Northern Alabama on the CW. So like, if I don't ever play another game on the CW,
conspiracies are only crazy if they're not true.
Right. I mean, it's a case can be made for it. This is all I'm saying. So we go here, we have our meeting. Now, I'm not the highest grade of weed in the dispensary. But can you sue somebody for something that you think that they're going to do before they actually do it? Is that possible? Or is that maybe a North Carolina thing?
It's a high risk situation for sure, but let's back up and understand what a declaratory judgment action is. Okay. All you are doing is you're asking the court to decide a specific legal issue before you decide to breach the contract. So what they were asking is for a judge, and they could have done this at any time in the history, is to say in North Carolina, this grant of rights is valid. That's what their ACC's filing was. Now, they filed it as soon as FSU announced their emergency meeting. Sunshine laws require that meetings be held in public and with notice. So FSU didn't have a choice but to announce the emergency meeting 24 hours before it happened. From there, the ACC could surmise or could guess as to what the reason for that meeting was. And they guessed right. They would have had egg on their face if they had filed their suit and all of our meeting was to talk about buying 2 more planes for recruiting purposes. But at the end of the day, FSU Board of Trustees did what the ACC thought they would do at that meeting. And so it really doesn't become a big deal. The other thing to throw in here is that the timing of the suit, who filed first, doesn't really matter at the end of the day. What's happening technically is most lawsuits you file where the defendant resides. I'm the plaintiff. I'm suing somebody. I have to go to where the defendant is located and sue them there. Both of these complaints, the plaintiff filed where the plaintiff resides, not the defendant. So there's a very curious question about jurisdiction and venue. The ACC is arguing, look, FSU is a member of the ACC. The headquarters are in North Carolina. They do business with us here in North Carolina. So FSU belongs in North Carolina in this suit. Florida State is arguing, look, the ACC has members in all these states. The ACC comes to Florida State as a representative. Florida State generates its revenue in Tallahassee, in Florida. And ultimately, this was a curiosity that came out with the litigation. The contract was signed in Tallahassee and transmitted electronically in this new era of electronic signing. So FSU has a bunch of arguments as to why this should be a Florida case. North Carolina, or ACC, has some arguments as to why this should be a North Carolina case. Well, both judges are going to provide home cooking. Both judges will probably say that the suit stays where it was filed. So now you have 2 competing lawsuits in 2 different states that are trying to tackle the same issue. That's why I think ultimately this is going to end up in a federal court. So what happens is the Florida case is removed to a Florida federal court. The North Carolina case is removed to a North Carolina federal court. And then those judges who aren't necessarily interested in as much home cooking can then decide on a legal basis and on the true merits whether this should be a Tallahassee, Florida case or a North Carolina case.
Said that now with the GOR, there was reports that one of the weaknesses in it was that you have to file in the state. Well, this was the rumor, so I'm asking for clarity on this. That you file that it's up to the school, and that you could file wherever. Now they could have made it to where everything had to go into North Carolina, similar to like if you want to sue your credit card company, it seems like all of them are in Delaware. And it seems like the laws really benefit them in Delaware. Something about most moving companies, they set their businesses up in Florida to where you have to, because the laws are, maybe the liability laws are a little bit different. Is that true, or was that kind of just some BS and people didn't really understand what that was at first?
So what you're talking about is a choice of law provision. And this is very common in contracts, especially where business is handled nationwide. So in a contract, there's typically a clause that says any litigation related to this contract will be in X state. And I want to use this as an example to all those people that are like, you signed a contract is valid, the contract is binding. There are bad contracts and there are bad attorneys that write bad contracts. They did not put any choice of law provision in the grant of rights nor in the ACC contract agreement. So yes, there is a question about where this should be filed, and it's all because some lawyer somewhere didn't do his job and didn't think that that was worth including in the contract. So that's one thing you can point to specifically to say, look, there are bad contracts out there. This is something that's fundamental. It's a basic rule of contracting nation. When you're dealing with businesses in multiple states, you should have put in that contract a choice of law provision, and they didn't.
Oh, wow. That's crazy. With Doug say your last names. I hate when I say people's last names wrong.
Doug Rohan, you got it
Rohan,
right.
okay.
Rohan Law.
Doug Rohan with Rohan Law. Make sure you go follow him on Twitter. I've got a couple more questions. I don't want to take a lot of your time because, I mean, obviously, one, there was a funny question, and it was from a whites, but it was great. So I think we should, again, if I read something good, I'm gonna say it. I can't find it. But he asked, he's like, the best question is how much are your billable hours for being on all these shows and talking about this? Because that is one thing that again I've learned that lawyer actually that's the better question too. Now that I think about it, that kind of segues me into this. Who pays if they lose? Because I know the beautiful thing about my lawsuit was that we knew we were going to win. So my attorney was just like, don't worry about it. We got this. And the billable law, the billable hours kind of shook the people into like knowing that it was frivolous. So if the ACC, if we don't settle this and this does go to court, is it looking like the ACC is Florida State might get a good chunk of change if it goes to court and they win? Because not only will they not have to pay for those things, they have to pay those lawyers that probably are employed by the university in some way, shape, or form.
So I'll answer the serious question first, and then the question about me and my law firm second. The serious answer is attorney's fees can be assessed by a judge, but they're typically assessed only in situations where the judge feels the litigation was unnecessary or improper. It's a punishment for not being reasonable. Start off with the reality that 98% of cases that are filed don't ever see the inside of a courtroom. And this case is very similarly likely. I think the strongest thing that the ACC can do is to talk about the point you made opening the show, avoid discovery. They want to make sure that they have some kind of NDA, non-disclosure agreement, as to what the sum is, and get something to wrap this up before it does continue to harm the reputation of the ACC. FSU is out of this conference. Now all we're talking about is when and for how much. There is no reconciliation. There is no way that this story ends with FSU in the conference long term. Now, maybe they're stuck until 2036, maybe they're stuck until 2027, but the FSU at some point is leaving the ACC. They're not going to sign another agreement upping their time with the conference. So that being said, it's unlikely that a judge will ever ultimately rule on attorney's fees. Even if the case goes to a litigation and sees the inside of a courtroom and sees a judgment, because you could even settle the case during the trial, there's still likely to be a judge that says, you know what, this was a valid controversy. This was a valid issue. There's not a lot of case law on the grant of rights because there hasn't been a lot of litigation about the grant of rights. So neither party was stupid to show up and litigate this case. This is a multi-million-dollar question, but potentially a $500 million question. So I don't think ultimately either side is going to get assessed attorney's fees, but that's the allegation in the latest filing from the ACC, and that's what they're trying to do to scare other members into not following suit. To get back to the question about me, I own my own business. We do personal injury, workers' comp, criminal defense. All of my fees are flat fee. And I've been taking time after work and certainly during breaks to get into this. The filing was at 4:15, so I spent 2 hours last night reviewing all the documents after the workday was done. So the business is going well. We're in Georgia. We're in Atlanta, Georgia, for any of your viewers who are in Georgia and might need legal services. But at the end of the day, I do this because I want to know what's going on. I have a passion for educating others, and I want to be able to break this down in a way that other people understand what's going on. Law Twitter is a very dangerous place to be without a law degree.
Oh yeah, it's a lot of opinions, a lot of interesting opinions, to say the least. It was something. So we talked about this, right? And you kind of, again, it's the title of the show. Talk to us a little bit about what the discovery process is, and how do you, obviously you don't have to use anything personally, but like, what would you what would be things as an attorney that you would want to get to know in discovery, and if you know your client might have some interesting things, why would you not want to get to discovery?
So in my personal practice, we do a lot of workers' compensation claims, and there are times where I don't want the defense attorney to know a lot of details about my client. So you can file an administrative request for benefits in workers' comp to bore you with the details, or you can request a hearing. If you request a hearing, you're opening the door to a deposition. There are some clients I don't want deposed, so I will try my hardest to negotiate a resolution or to move forward with the claim without requesting a hearing, because that's a Pandora's box I don't want to open. Similarly here, the ACC, and you can tell by how they have each filed their original complaints, Florida State came out and had all these documents attached to their exhibits saying, hey, look at all these reasons why Florida State should win. The ACC filed their court case with several documents under seal. And what they're doing is they have to provide the documents to the court. They have to provide it to the judge. They have to provide it to the opposing party. But by placing it under seal, they're keeping it from being out in the public domain. So ACC is very careful to make sure that some of their information doesn't get leaked out, whereas FSU is like, screw this, we're burning it all to the ground. And that's one of the reasons why the ACC amended their complaint yesterday. They wanted the judge to issue an injunction. What they're saying there is tell FSU that there are some ground rules to this litigation, and that is that they can't disclose any of this information. The fact that they've already disclosed some of this is harmful. The whole deal about ESPN having a unilateral right in 2025 for the broadcast option in 2027 to 2036, nobody knew about. So this came out, and now there is a legitimate question. Is ESPN going to exercise its right? Does ESPN want to pay for this product if FSU is not a member? This now creates a more urgent problem for the ACC, because ESPN can sit back and say, you guys figure this out first, then we'll decide what we want to do with this unilateral right to extend our contract to 2036.
Now, with Florida Sunshine State laws, basically meaning that any government employee, basically everything that they, not everything, but any kind of government official use, email, phones, things like that, has to be open to and transparent. Does that even make sense? Can a judge in North Carolina stop a business that runs a government entity in the state of Florida from doing? I can see Miami being a private university, but with Florida State being a public university, do they have any jurisdiction over that?
I don't know the answer to that, and that's one of the things that I'm following closely, because I'm very curious as to that answer as well. That's why I mentioned before the non-disclosure agreement in a settlement. If this goes to trial and there is a public disclosure of whatever the judgment is, then we know for sure it's a public issue. If there is a settlement, is there any way for the Board of Trustees to agree to a non-disclosure agreement? Does that violate Florida laws? I don't know the answer to that. That's a very, very niche, specific area that I'm not comfortable making an opinion about. But some part of a settlement is probably going to resolve trying to resolve that issue, because once the number gets out, once everybody knows what Florida State had to pay, Clemson's coming along, and North Carolina's coming along, Virginia, Miami, everybody else is going to be following suit. So the best thing I believe the ACC can do is come up with a quick settlement and figure out a way to keep that number from being public.
Yeah, that's really the big thing, is obviously that multiple teams are going to come with this. This is inevitable. and you did absolutely nothing. I think a better strategy would have been, hey, we're in a shitty deal. If I'm the president of the ACC or the chairman of the ACC, ESPN, we need to figure this out. CBS, Fox, who ironically is really trying to unseat ESPN as the premier organization with sports. I would have tried to go do what I need to do as I'm bringing in SMU, all these other schools to try to expand it. We'll be the only conference that's coast to coast, north, south, east, west. Even though they suck, but you're bringing in Cal, and you're bringing in. We have Boston College, we got Syracuse. You have your schools kind of Midwestish, not really, but kind of Midwestish. But you go raid somebody else, and now you have all the opportunities to be able to renegotiate your deal. We also have a governor that is got a hard on for Disney and the mouse. So like that will literally back you, like, which is kind of crazy to even think about that. You literally have a governor that said, I don't like this. We stand by our university. So like I would try to figure out a better way to kind of go about and make this happen. Can you make sense of this last thing that the ACC kind of put into court? I guess they amended what they were doing. Can you tell us what it was? It kind of explain to us what that amendment does, because it kind of said, like, I've heard people kind of maybe oversimplify it, but like I'm curious the true legal definition of that.
Well, first, let me touch on a point that you mentioned, and that was bringing in the 3 new members. When we're talking about the breach of fiduciary duty and not acting in the best interest, especially of their bell cow, that's another data point in the issue that ACC is arguing from a position of weakness and just interested in their survival. You'll remember last summer when we started talking about the grant of rights and how we get out of the grant of rights, one option was for 7 members to just vote, we're going to dissolve the ACC. So what they've done is first they introduced 3 new members to raise that number. Remember, the bottom half of the ACC is perfectly happy. We've got good basketball schools. We get to travel in a close area for all of our secondary sports. And we're not going to get an invite from the Big Ten or the SEC. So yeah, Wake Forest is happy to sit here in the ACC and just play for an NCAA basketball tournament every year. To then go to your point about the amended filing yesterday, what the ACC did, and it's very normal, it's standard practice to amend a complaint. That's not unusual at all. But the ACC, having filed first, didn't know what FSU was going to say in their filing. So FSU makes their filing. The ACC can then go back and read that filing and bolster some of their arguments. So really that amended complaint is asking for 2 things. First, they're amending what it is that they're asking the judge specifically to decide and what basis to decide that the grant of rights is valid. But the second thing is these injunctions that they want FSU to abide by. So they're asking a judge to say, look, before you even decide on the merits whether the grant of rights is valid or the ACC contract is valid, you need to shut Florida State up. You need to make sure they don't disclose stuff. And you need to make sure that we have the right to conduct our ACC business without FSU meddling in what's going on. They don't get to vote on any new members. They don't get to vote and participate in any of our meetings because they've already said that they want out. And because they've already said that they don't like being here, they don't get to vote. And what that does is that chills at Clemson and the other groups from coming in because they don't want to lose their voice in any ACC business while this litigation is pending.
But I guess our thing would be, fuck it. Like, what do we? They already made a deal without us, basically with a backdoor deal with ESPN without our agreement. I mean, okay, if they want to move conference headquarters, we don't really care. Like, we don't want to be here. So I guess, but you do want to have some role, but like, I guess that doesn't put any fear for, let's say 2024 season, we do what we're supposed to do again. We still can compete in the ACC championship as long as we're a member. They just want to make us not be privy to any new information, I guess.
They want us to be a silent partner. We're here. Yeah. We don't get to say anything about it.
Okay. Well, whatever. They basically rendered us silent anyway. So we got to get, but the key in all of this, and I remember being on part of this, is that there is no such thing as you might not get out of it. You might get out of it with only your clothes on your back, but there is no such thing as a true ironclad contract. anything can be broken.
That is correct.
And Florida State, whether it be, I think it would be 2025. That's just my personal opinion. From the information that I'm privy to, but whether it's 2025, whether it's right before my second son goes to Florida State in 2036, we ain't gonna be here in this conference very much longer. And it's probably go ahead, my bad.
Yeah, I was gonna say, let me mention 2 points. First, I agree with you 100%. I am an FSU homer. I am coming to this with pro FSU glasses on. But let me say, one of the parts of the FSU complaint that I don't think is going to hold any water is they're asking the judge to relate back. If you agree that the grant of rights isn't valid, and if you agree that FSU can get out of their ACC contract, we want you to relate back our notice to August 2023. I don't think that there is a way that they can seriously recommend that. I think that is a scare tactic. That's a posturing tactic with the ACC because they didn't announce their departure. They announced that they wanted to explore their departure, but that's not the same as announcing your departure. Now, to your other point, I do think that it is possible that FSU loses. I'm not saying that it's a slam dunk, but understand what FSU losing means. Maybe we have to pay some attorney's fees. The state of Florida has already set aside $1 million for attorney's fees for our side and for their side. So that's the worst case scenario. We won't be hit with a bill. Florida State won't be hit with a bill for $500,000. It just means that until 2036, the ACC continues to get our rights to those media deals, and we can't leave the conference and negotiate differently. So worst case scenario is the status quo. That's why this was low risk litigation, because even if we just get stuck in this conference through 2036, we're not getting hit with a $500 million bill. We just need to keep respecting the grant of rights until 2036.
So basically, worst case scenario, nothing changes.
Exactly.
Best case scenario, everything changes. We out, and we get. And now we're the pretty girl. We're the pretty girl at prom. Everybody wants to date us.
Exactly.
Because again, if you don't think that the fact that this is news lets us know that we're going to be highly coveted.
10 million people watched 63-3. We knew it was going to be a bad game. Mm-hmm. It was the biggest non-playoff viewership of all the bowls. We had 1/3 of ACC viewership on FSU games and whoever they happen to be playing that week. There is no chance that the Big Ten or SEC doesn't want us. They just can't tell us that because they don't want to get in trouble for what's called tortious interference of business practices. They don't want to get hit for luring or colluding FSU to leave the ACC. So that's why all this, where are they going to go? They're going to be a G5 power. No, we will end up somewhere. We just can't have those conversations until we're out of the ACC.
Right. So one of the questions was by Tristan, is it best for FSU to go back to being independent? I don't think we will ever do that. I think there's only one brand that's strong enough because they've never merged, and they had to kind of merge with a conference, which is the ACC, that'd be Notre Dame. While we would make some money, we would not make as much money. When you're looking at what the SEC and what the Big Ten, you're talking about in a few years, these guys getting $100 million per school. There is not a deal we're going to strike with just us that's going to get us that much money. And then on the other side, SEC is going to 9-game schedules. The only reason we play Florida is because there's actual law that forces that game to be played. There's a bill. Don't believe me? Go look the shit up. I didn't know it until I played. Notre Dame just has these. They got the ACC games so they can make sure they have that, and they kept these rivalries that they've had for decades. We don't have enough natural rivalries, and even at the Big Ten is probably going to shift to a 9-game schedule. And I don't even think I'm shocked the Alabama game hasn't been canceled as of right now, because they're shifting to a 9-game schedule. And now that's tough when you go to a 9-game schedule, and then now you're going to play a top team, and you don't get your 2 directional schools. Like, that's not going to help you. So you have to do something that's going to prepare you for the season and get you some good looks. So, there's really, nobody else. If anybody else has any questions real quick, please enter those into the chat quickly. I mean, you've basically, answered all of the things that I wanted outside of the one thing because you're in Georgia, so you wouldn't be know as much about sunshine laws, which makes sense. But I guess while we're doing that, tell us a little bit. I mean, you told us a little bit. Tell us a little bit more about the law you practice, where you're out of, and then even your background as an FSU grad.
Sure. Well, first off, I'm a 4-year marching chief. I was there in '93, my freshman year with Charlie Ward in the national championship. Stayed there until law school was out and was at 3 national championship games. Was there for Ward and Wanke at New Orleans. And so I am a diehard Florida State fan out of the 305 originally. So I had to deal with the Hurricanes growing up. And as a kid, sure, I went to Marklight Stadium and watched a couple baseball games, national championships. But once I got to high school and started looking at the program, I just loved and fell in love with Florida State. I also wanted to get as far away from Miami as possible. I then went to law school in Florida State. I stayed there. Loved hanging out with all of my friends. And of course, the girls were good looking. Ended up finding a wife there. My wife is from Alabama, so she didn't speak Spanish. So going back to Miami wasn't an option. And that's how we ended up in Atlanta, Georgia. We wanted a big city. We wanted something in the Southeast. We wanted to be close enough to get back to all the football games. So I still am a season ticket holder and still go back to as many games as I can. But I do have my practice here in Atlanta, Georgia. Atlanta Seminole Club is the largest FSU alumni base outside of the state of Florida. And so that's why I do this. It's a good opportunity. And, it's not like mailing you a Chinese menu on Thursday and you're thinking, yeah, I do want Chinese. Let me go ahead and order them. In Florida for attorneys, I just, want you to follow our page and follow along with us on social media. And hopefully you never need me. If you're calling me, you've had a bad day. So we deal with all kinds of criminal offenses, traffic citations, up to homicide. We've got several attorneys here that practice the different criminal practice areas. And then, of course, workers' comp and personal injury. So if you ever find yourself in Georgia and you need a NOL to come alongside you and help you through a really bad time, our slogan is we want to be your best friends on your worst day, because anybody that calls me and needs me is not having a good day.
Okay, and the last question, and you can answer this how you feel. Like, because is the best strategy, because I saw Irvin Williams, he asked if Clemson or any ACC school files soon, does that affect the case? What if Clemson, Miami, Florida State, I'm trying to think of a school that matters, say Georgia Tech, I don't think very many private schools are going to want to do it because they have to operate differently. Their consequences would be different than ours. But let's just say 5 schools just said, you know what, we don't like the direction, and they all follow suit. Is that another effective strategy? Because you can't beat everybody, or with me, can, but spreading out one office like that thin, or spreading out the ACC funds, is that a strategy that we've seen, or would they try to or could they what do you need for class action? I guess that's basically what I'm asking for. Damn near a class action lawsuit against the ACC.
So each of the file cases will be handled as separate complaints and separate files. But in a class action lawsuit, what you do is you have a sample plaintiff. You find whichever plaintiff has the most gut-wrenching story, the most sympathetic story, the best plaintiff from a background standpoint, and you try that one case in front of a jury. That then gives both parties an idea of what would happen if this were to play out through the litigation of all the cases. The same judge won't be assigned to every case. Different judges could come up with different opinions, but if the ACC loses their first case, that takes away the argument that the grant of rights can't be broken. So that's the risk for the ACC. Look, the ACC, first off, has demonstrated 30 years of not having particularly capable negotiators. You mentioned how good our president is. I am so satisfied with who is in charge of Florida State right now, making these decisions between President McCullough, Ponder with the boosters, Alford, our director, and Mike Norvell as the coach. I can't think of a collection of 4 top leadership officials in any other program that are so aligned, have the same vision, and happen to be intelligent enough to carry out a very delicate operation like destroying the grant of rights. So in the question of what is the ACC supposed to do, I'm very glad I don't have a seat at that table, because they really only have two choices. They can either go all in and fight this 100%, or they can decide that they're playing for a valuable settlement. If they are going all in and if they're going to fight this tooth and nail, the downside is the ACC ceases to exist in the next 10 years. That's a realistic scenario. So by negotiating and settling, it's still difficult. It's still going to be hard, but they have to thread the needle of getting out of these fights for a price that ensures that the ACC on a second tier basis can continue as a basketball school like the Big East was, as a Olympic sports school like the Pac-12 is, or Pac-2 is now effectively going to be. Now, if you get 5 different plaintiffs filing suit and you negotiate $150 million from each of them, well, now the ACC has a war chest where they, instead of waiting for till 2036 for 10 or 20 million dollars to come in the door over the next 15 years, they're going to get a lump sum of $500 million, $750 million to ensure that they can get through this very difficult time. That's why I think ultimately a settlement is the most likely scenario, because I think, frankly, a settlement with 3, 4, 5 of the members is the best, most likely scenario to ensure the ACC continues to exist.
Then it keeps you very viable. You still have enough schools to be able to stay a college football invitational member if they win, so you don't drop to the group of 6 now. You don't become group of 7. And you could potentially attract maybe like South Florida's going to Big 12. No, they're not going to Big 12. You could attract the South Florida or some other teams that are pretty decent, Liberty, guys that are in the other stuff, so that you can put up a pretty decent brand. That's very interesting information, man. I appreciate that. What instrument did you play in the Chiefs?
I was a saxophone, and my wife was
my guy.
Mm-hmm.
My God, I played alto sax in middle school. Then when I went to high school, they don't let you. They wouldn't let me do that. It was like you would have to be in your full uniform out there playing at halftime, and I was just like, that's not going to happen. So,
and then you're also a Leo too, right?
Yeah, I'm a Leo. Yep,
yeah,
definitely that. Very much so.
August. I follow those posts too, and it's like, yep, that's right. Yep, that's right.
Yeah, I told one of them, I was like, hey, man, y'all got to chill out. You're going to have people thinking I'm some kind of softy or something, and they're going to keep trying me. It takes a lot to get to that core, man. Like, you gotta chisel through a lot of rock, but it's there. But you might get tired. but yeah, man, so a lot of things in common, man. And again, I am probably one of the biggest Chiefs fans ever.
Every away game. Let's get that endowment filled, and let's send them to every away game.
I told them that, when I found out we didn't go to Miami, I'm so glad we beat their ass that time too. When they didn't want to bring us there, I said, that's some bullshit. I said, hey, he told me to debt it. I was like, cool. I was like, how much money we need? Because I could every summer I raise $100,000 or more for my book bag drop. I'm like, man, fuck them kids. We'll get that to the band. Like, that's what we got to go do. We'll go put the money in towards get the band where they need to be at. Because I need to hear Seminole Uprising. I need to hear the good, the bad, and the ugly when we do our little walk-off. And I damn sure need to hear that war chant, especially the whistle. One of the greatest moments in my life wasn't scoring touchdowns. Was when I got to lead, when I got to go to band practice, and they gave me that damn whistle, and I was able to do the whistle. I said, you have no idea how jealous my teammates are going to be, because that was we used to be like, that's the coldest part of the whole thing, is just a little whistle breakdown. But and my son, funny story, my baby boy would cry, and then I played Seminole Uprising, and then he'd stop and he'd just look around. I'm like, what the hell is he looking at? It was the funniest thing. And then now he just, after going to a game, he'll just be sitting around and just like he'll just break out randomly in a war chant. I'm like, raise him up right, young.
Amen and amen.
All right, man. Well, I appreciate you for chopping it up with me for this time, man. I know you got to go make your money. I appreciate you being a flat rate lawyer. Guys, listen, that's game. Dave Chappelle actually just came on and told somebody about, contract law. Get the flat rate lawyer. especially if you have a big deal. Don't tell them how big the deal is first, but just get the flat rate lawyer. That's always that always ends up working out in your favor a little bit more.
Yep.
But appreciate you, man. And if we have some more legal questions, man, look forward to trying to have you on again.
I'll see you on X.
All right, man. That's my guy, Doug. Rohan Law. Please make sure you go follow him on Twitter at Rohan, ROHAN LAWPC, at Rohan Law PC on X. My bad. I just keep your mama named it Twitter, so I'm gonna call you Twitter. Keep following him on that. Really good, very insightful. I appreciate him taking this time out of his day to be able to come here and educate our fan base. Please share this. Again, I'm all about giving people little, very good stuff to where they can go out and they can actively put things forward. We may try to have somebody who can help us with Sunshine, because I don't really understand Sunshine State law as much, but I definitely love the breakdown, and everything else he gave us was easily digestible. So remember that, please. Right now, we are 560 subs away from 5,000, with the goal of getting 10,000 this year. Once we get to 5,000 subs, we will give away $500 live on Big Games BS, and then we'll give a secondary cash prize for however many likes that we have on the YouTube channel. Today, I think we had 56. So somebody would have got $500, and then somebody would have got $56. Please consider becoming a member. All money that we raise on this YouTube channel goes towards Mentors for the Kids, the MFTK Foundation, which helps us do our community projects. Outside of that, appreciate everybody for chopping it up with us here, and we will see you guys next time.
Ready, Mom?
Yep.
All right. Yeah, that's a completely different
Feel.
feel.